Thank you. Thank you very much also for the music. He chose a 20th century Japanese composer. So thank you. Thank you, Bob. And thank you for the introduction. It's wonderful to be here. Such a beautiful church. And also this arrangement here. I think they're a little bit conscious of Japanese-ness here. Just feels so welcome. You know, talking about flowers, this talk is going to start with the story of flowers because one time I was looking at the beautifully arranged flowers, and when I was really carefully looking and enjoying the fragrance, the bumblebee came. And the bumblebee is also examining the flowers. And the question came to me, is this bumblebee seeing the same flowers as I am? And you know that scientifically speaking, the insects don't see the way we see flowers because the way our eyes are structured differently. They see it in infrared. You know, science is great. You know, they can find out about these things. But then it really made me think, what is the reality of these flowers? What does flower really look like? What is flower? But what is really reality? I used to think reality is out there, and I'm kind of observing it. But then I realized the reality is within my own self, in the observer. So if that's the case, what if we had an eye that is structured so pure and perfect? Whatever is reflected on that eye is equally pure and perfect. That is God's eye view. And that view is full of love. That love is like the special lens that obliterates which is not lovely, which is not harmonious, which is not lastingly peaceful and healthy. So I just thought that today's topic really explores this idea that who is watching and who's watched. In the Bible, I will be referring to the Holy Bible and the textbook of Christian Science, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, written by the American author, Mary Baker Eddy. And I'll refer to her a little bit later, but there's a special phrase in the Bible that I really came to love, which is the apple of one's eye. You say, you are the apple of my eye. And I used to think that was just a phrase out of the pop song. You know, when it's kind of a love song, I think, when someone say, you are the apple of my eye. Do you agree? But here, it is in the Bible. I didn't know it was in the Bible. But anyway, it says in Deuteronomy, he found him in the desert land and in the waste howling wilderness. Sounds like today. He led him about, he instructed him, he kept him as the apple of his eye. And in Psalms 17, it says, show thy marvelous loving kindness, O thou that savest by thy right hand them which put their trust in thee, from those that rise up against them. Keep me as the apple of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings. Well, in Japanese, we have a phrase, when we see someone who's so adorable, we say, it won't hurt to put you in my eyes. So there's something about it that when we are in love and if we want to care about someone, we keep an eye on that person. But then it just occurred to me, the question came again, this is an Old Testament written in Middle East. Were there apples? You know, where did this phrase come from? Apple of one's eye. And so I looked it up in Hebrew dictionary, and in it, it says in Hebrew, it says, you are the apple, not apple, you are the child of my eye. a little person. What do we call in the middle of our eyes? Pupil. Pupils are little people who go to school. But anyway, if one is really looking at the person, that person is reflected in that person's eye. And why a child? Because the ones who's looking at is the parent. Well, I am very inquisitive, and I thought in Japanese we call pupil hitomi. Sound says looking at a person. But in Chinese character that we borrowed to say hitomi consists of two parts. It says I and a little child. That means pupil. So there's some sense of universality that when we think that somebody is keeping an eye on and someone is loving you, you are right in the middle of that person's eye. So Christian Science really made me read these scriptures more spiritually, in a way, practical ways that we can use these phrases in our own lives. And this textbook, Science and Health, I'll just abbreviate it and say Science and Health, helps me a great deal. And Mary Baker Eddy, who is a contemporary of Susan B. Anthony, Clara Barton, and about a decade younger than Abraham Lincoln, lived in that time of, I would say, turmoil in American history. I cannot even imagine one country being split in two, and you have to have war against your own people. But when that whole tragic war was over, we know that there were those who were emancipated from the system of slavery. The system had to change. They fought for a system to change. And when you think about a person like Susan B. Anthony, she is a leader of the women's suffrage. She knew that this country promises freedom, not just to the selected few, but for everyone, the blacks and women, and those who are, underprivileged. Clara Barton's another one. She started the American Red Cross, following suit of Nightingale in England, where she was known to be the mother of all nurses. These women actually had a vision to see what is possible. We always advance further when we have a vision further beyond what we see now. And Mary Baker Eddy, who is a great spiritual thinker, but also a seeker and thinker, wanting to have this freedom, the freedom individually, not so much that when the system finally changes, but when our thinking changes. Well, she had this experience, what I called epiphany. And according to the dictionary, epiphany is a sudden intuitive realization to insight into reality. When she had this fatal injury, that she had an internal injury, and had recovered after reading the healing account in the Bible, her sense of reality had shifted from the 5 material sense-based reality to spiritual sense of reality. And once she grasped that and felt that that is something that will give us the lasting freedom, she really dug deep into the Bible and tried to find the underlying principles that will lead us to freedom and healing. Well, she, in her adult life, was always looking for health, but health through what we might call alternative medicine, including homeopathy. She was a practitioner of homeopathy. But when this healing had happened, she just felt like, I am not really here to fix the material body, but to be awakened to the reality where man has always been pure and perfect. And she's basing on the Bible, the very first chapter of Genesis, where we read the creation stories. The very first chapter has these verses. It says, "And God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.' So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." He says, we are going to make man in the image and likeness. It didn't say, let's make man using these clays. Let's fashion and mold them. Image and likeness. And I want you to be thinking about this image, the word image, when I ask you to close your eyes to have this image of, say, sunflower. Do you see that image in your own thought? That's yours. Can I grab that image out of you? No. When God thought of us as an image and likeness of himself, it's within that mind, written with capital M, another word for God mentioned in the Bible. And that mind holding as an image stays there. And who is looking at that image? The original one that is thinking of us. We tend to think that we are created chronologically somehow, like God is like a manufacturer, going on this timeline. But all it takes for God to say is once. Just as when he said, "Let there be light," he didn't say, "Let there be lights." No, let there be light, and all the expression, infinite expression of light appear. And it's still appearing. The more we go further out into the universe, we're seeing more stars. The lights keep increasing. And if we know that God is infinite, the expression, the image and likeness he holds in his mind are also infinite. When God said, "Let there be man as an image and likeness," you were already there. And you still are there as an image and likeness maintained in one mind. So that's the real big picture that we're starting from. And some people might say, "Well, I don't really believe in God." I know it's sometimes like a very, sensitive word, because we think like not many people believe in God. But then I ask these people, "But do you believe in infinite or infinity?" Not the name of the car. Infinite. I have not met anyone who said, "I don't believe in infinity or infinite." We use numbers every day. That's infinite metaphysical ideas. We can actually practically use it in our lives. We never say there is no infinite. How about music? Music is so beautiful. That's another metaphysical idea, not plural, idea. We know music is infinite. Mozart was recorded after said that music comes to his mind. He can hardly catch up, in writing down. Where does that sound come from? It's not from within himself. There must be that conscious one, the conscious of the entire universe that we have even just begun to see what it is, that we know that it's expanding. That it's infinite. When I was growing up, I was told that the universe was shrinking. Do you remember? We were so worried. What's going to happen? We're going to go. Now they're saying it's expanding. Isn't it that our view of the infinity is expanding? That's where we belong. We're not a small idea. We belong to this infinite idea called universe that includes you. But anyway, one thing that I have mentioned earlier, that full of this love, I had an experience that I remember after studying Christian Science, that when I was in elementary school, about 4th grade, I was struck by this wave of love. I didn't know how to explain, but all I wanted to do was to love. And it was not like I liked certain boys or anything. It was just that expression of love. I just felt like my heart was filled up with love. So I just challenged myself and asked myself, can you love even that science teacher that everybody hates? And surprisingly, the answer was an overwhelming yes. I love him. I love him. I can marry him. It was a little precocious, I was only 4th grade. But I really meant it. And I didn't tell this to anyone because it was kind of embarrassing, My friends wouldn't understand, like, maybe she's really out of her mind. But it's what really reminded me of this sentence was this. Here it says, in this textbook, Jesus beheld in science the perfect man who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness, and this correct view of man healed the sick. Jesus beheld. Beheld means to witness, observe, keep in mind, be conscious of, to observe. Jesus saw in science that perfect man. He had this view, that perfect eye view, that gave this ability to heal. But it was not he himself healing another person. That view, correct view, actually revealed the real person. So I was wondering, why did these sentences remind me of that experience in my elementary school? No, he saw that perfect man. I saw the perfect man, the science teacher. And I know the ability to see him as perfect proceeded with this feeling of enormous love. Love obliterated that prejudice, the misunderstanding, the limited way of seeing that man. He was probably a very good person. But there are the reasons that we decided that we didn't like him. Well, first of all, he wasn't handsome. But that, this is kind of a school with most of them are girls, and they're already at 4th grade thinking that teacher is handsome and this teacher is not handsome. But anyway, it really did not make me see those faults after that love enveloped me, the view. And I thought, what about Jesus? And the more I read about him in the Bible, you probably know that when he saw the multitude, he had compassion over them. And I thought, multitude, that's maybe hundreds, thousands of people. How can you have that much compassion? Is he just feeling sorry that these are lost sheep? Or did he possibly have that overwhelming sense of love that made him able to see them as God saw them? That all in all is another name for God. That all in all is that one view. And that one view seems to really have an importance in healing. That I appears many times in this, the Bible. But I have another story from India. We're going to be traveling around Asia today. I was invited to speak at medical nursing school in Mumbai, India. It used to be called Bombay. because one of the members of this church, Christian Science Church, was a physician. The father was a physician. And he witnessed enough healing. He thought it would be very beneficial for me to speak for those students who were to become nurses. Because he knew nurses really had to talk with the patients and have to deal with the parents, not parents, the families. And it is considered somewhat more stressful work than doctors. And so I was there thinking, what can I share with this group of people consisting of Hindi, Buddhist, Christian, and non-believers? And I chose the Lord's Prayer. Because the Lord's Prayer does not have any words that somehow exclude any one of them. And you know how it starts? It starts with Our Father. That's God. And every single one of them agreed that nobody is without a father. And they can agree that this Father is really looking over us. And I was talking about the healing when we regard that hallowed be thy name, holy is your name, is also the name of the patients. Patients are not cancer patients. It's a holy person right there, God's child. So I was explaining this, and suddenly one of the instructors raised hand and said, I want to also share the healing. And I said, please go ahead. And she said, several years ago, she was diagnosed with the cancer in pancreas, and it was in the very last stage. She was devastated because she knew she had to leave her work that she loved. And she knew, according to the prognosis of the doctor, that she was not to have more than a year to live. She was so depressed. And one of the family gatherings that she had, the niece noticed how dark and sorrowful she looked. So she came to this person, the instructor who is her aunt, and she says, Auntie, what's wrong with you? And so she didn't really want to talk about cancer, but she simply said, I have something dark and bad inside me. And there was a kind of a word that really suggests something evil inside. As soon as she heard this niece said, no, Auntie, you don't have anything dark or bad inside you. And she just hugged. She hugged her tight and for a long time. As this instructor was going home, thinking of how pure the way she looked at her, she started to have tears welling up in her eyes, and she went home. A few days later, she was supposed to have another checkup. The same instrument, the same physicians. They could not find the cancer. She was completely healed. And she's volunteering this healing to me and saying, well, this is really important thing to know, that what is already being diagnosed is not the final say. And I just said, well, I don't need to speak here. Your account of healing is so much more powerful. It's not really something that we can divide by religion. It's a universal truth. And this man, the teacher, I regard as the best teacher for this subject, a healing, through understanding our spiritual identity. He said, "He shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Does it say that you have to understand this doctrine or creed and then you will finally find the salvation and be free? No. It's the shortest sentence to tell you how we are privileged and have the rights to be free. And the truth, in any place around the world, I can quote this. I go to Indonesia, and they all agree. The truth always makes us free. Mary Baker Eddy understood this, and she gives this wonderful sentences here. She says, observation, invention, study, and original thought are expansive and should promote the growth of a mortal mind out of itself, out of all that is mortal. Meaning, the limited sense needs to be freed. And why? Because we are made to be free. Observation, invention, study. I was asking the other day to the audience, everybody or almost everybody have something called smartphone. And I was working in the semiconductor industry. The phone used to be much bigger. And they were all trying to make the phones lighter and smaller, the computers smaller and lighter and thinner, and especially the phones. And that one of the engineers told me at that time, Fujiko, the more we understand the principles, we need less matter. That sentence came back to me when I read that sentence. Why do we want a smaller phone? Anyone? Convenience, yeah. Can you imagine hauling a big phone? Like we used to have one in the car too, like this big. But it also made it affordable, didn't it? That also shows that what's really good should be available to all, like health, security, right? Meaningfulness in your life. When Jesus said truth shall make you free, freeing us out of this box that tried to say and limit us that we can't, because this is the only place that we can think. But every thinker that's so beyond that so-called material sense had a vision. That's why we call visionary or seers. People who have thought through beyond, and at certain point it may be sounding like metaphysical ideas, become the tangible ideas. Like the theory of relativity, it was a metaphysical idea until it was proven by Eddington, who was very good at math and did the experiment. Einstein had that spiritual sense, you might say spiritual instinct, and he's the one who said, religion without science is lame. Science without religion is blind. He called God illimitable spirit. It was the one, what he really wanted to know was the thought of God, he said. Exactly what we were talking about, that mind. What is mind holding? What is mind knowing about that? So that whole story of that Jesus beholding in science, that science must be that spiritual law that holds the entire universe. That science allows us to see. And how come this girl see that so clearly? In the Bible it says in Habakkuk, God, it says, you are of purer eyes than to behold evil and cannot look on iniquity. Jesus had also said, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. It says the light of the body is the eye, not the eyes, just one eye, the way you see things. And it says, therefore, when your eye be single. This word single in Japanese translation in the Bible is translated as when your eye is simple and pure. So it corresponds with this sense that Habakkuk is saying, yes, when your eye is so pure, what is reflected in that eye is pure as well. And that allows this light to come through. Eye is a symbol for light too, isn't it? But it's the one eye. And Mary Baker Eddy says here about that spiritual sense this way. Every sentence here she experienced, and she had to think through, she prayed about it, how to express this. Because this was such a new idea. The very first edition was published in 1875. And just to think about this title, Science and Health, it could be published yesterday. It's such an updated subject. It's not old. But anyway, she says, spirit and its formations are the only realities of being. Matter disappears under the microscope of spirit. The microscope, scientists in the labs look through the microscopes to see the evidence, the material evidences. Here she's saying, if we look through the microscope of spirit, matter disappears. Isn't that exactly what happened with this instructor and that very innocent niece that really loved her aunt? And there it is. Again, love is there. Love is the base. And this love written with capital L. Well, one time, he was introducing my family. My older daughter was living in China. She was studying there, and then she got a job there. And while she was there, my husband wanted to go there and take a vacation out in the countryside. So they were out there, and I was staying in Tokyo, Japan, taking care of my parents at that time. And one day I was out doing my grocery shopping, and I received a text from my daughter. Thank goodness there were still phone signals there. And the text said, Dad is in great pain. Pray. Help. That's it. It didn't say why he was in pain, but that was the shortest sentence, the text that I received. I found a place to sit down and found a bench, so I sat down and dropped my grocery, and I closed my eyes and really thought of this. Here's a distance, China and Tokyo, somewhere deep countryside in China. I don't even know where they were at. But I just felt that it's the same place for God, viewing us at the same time, simultaneously knowing his children as image and likeness of himself. And I just also remember the sentence, the light of the body is the eye. That light is through me and through my husband. Before I was going to text back to my daughter, another text came. And it says, that is fine. That's it? Okay. But I didn't really know till they came back to Japan and explained to me that they were out in the country and they had a meal, and my husband exhibited that food poisoning symptoms. And it was so bad. He's a very tall man, bent in half, like a ball, sweating and in great pain. And that's when she texted me. And she said, before my text went back, and the reason she texted me back so quickly is because he sprang up suddenly and said, it's gone. That was the first time he experienced this, that instant, immediate healing. And it's interesting because I looked up the word immediate. It actually means there is no medium, no one in between. And when we think, yes, someone is praying that that person is the cause of this healing, it's really not having anyone between that person who's looking for healing and God. That's the important thing that we need to know. No one can be in between. Nothing that somehow bodily symptoms was changed because my thought somehow reached. No, actually, I don't think it was fast enough, because almost split second later, he was feeling that he was free. The truth had made him free, not a person. And Mary Baker Eddy explains, even Christ Jesus, when he had so-called performed the miracles, everyone, either that he gives credit to the person that he had faith or she had faith. But those who are healed praise God, not praising Jesus. If you go back and read, investigate the Bible, it's very clear that he was completely transparent. Only thing he's doing is to acknowledge who is seeing this man in front of him who seemed lamed, a man with leprosy. He even went to touch them. You know, when by law, the Judaism, they have all these laws, you're not supposed to touch them. In fact, those lepers are supposed to walk the very edge of the road, the path. You have to keep declaring themselves, I'm passing, the leper's passing, so nobody would be, getting close. Why was he so fearless? Because he was seeing what God was seeing. As these are so important, we keep going back to this idea Jesus beheld in science the perfect man. And that science is that spiritual view that holds the entire universe. Much more reliable than what we see with our own eyes. These two eyes trying to make sense out of evil and good and bad. And Mary Baker Eddy was a great reader, not only a great scientist. She says here, even right before the table of content, this quote first, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." And the next one, by Shakespeare, she says, "There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so," by Shakespeare. We tend to judge because our limited sense thinks that we have a whole story. We don't. We need to really drop that personal opinions and a view of things. And if something looks horrible, a personality or a weather, we have to see through it. For this weather, a person that I call and say, would you please support? We have a very important event here. And that person will say, shepherd, God is like shepherd, shepherding all the clouds to its right place. It's like interesting way to see. Who is in control? And the fear, dissipated, and I was completely free of that fear. So these are interesting but also important ideas. Mary Baker Eddy understood that these ideas are not original, personal wisdom. It comes from God. And in fact, there's a way that God let us know that God is thinking of us. The right ideas always visiting us. And when we open up our own thought and keep it clear, we can really let these ideas come in. And Mary Baker Eddy understood that Christ Jesus, or Jesus the Christ, embodied this ability to see the message coming to every single person. She says about Christ, Christ is the true idea voicing good, the divine message from God to man, speaking to the human consciousness. The true idea voicing good, the divine message from God to men. When that girl said no to her auntie, that only thing she saw was good. It's not something personally she had come up with that idea. It's a constant flow of the right message coming to the lips of that little child. And we can also be expecting that for every single one of us. Even to those who may not be believing in God. Even those who may not really know about so-called this study called Christian Science. Well, the last story, we went to India and China, so we're going to Korea. In fact, I was called, living in State College, Pennsylvania. One day, a friend of mine in Korea, who is a student of Christian Science, called me and said, Fujiko, I told you about this in-law who had been struggling with cancer, and finally, he said he had given up all the medicine, Western medicine. He was in Texas for Anderson Research, some kind of special institute for cancer. He was in New York. He'd done everything he could possibly do. But that friend of mine said he just fell under coma, and the doctor said he won't make it, maybe to the weekend. And it was like a few days before the weekend. He said, would you please come? We're ready to buy your ticket. So they flew me from State College, Pennsylvania. I had to go to Washington, D.C., and then to Seoul, Korea. So middle of the winter. And I have these ugly snow boots. I was not really packing very well. As soon as I arrived in Seoul, Korea, they picked me up and took me straight to the hospital where this gentleman was. And when I entered into this gentleman's room, there was no family member. And the person who called me said, who's a student of Christian Science, said, you know, in the Bible, it says, and Jesus made, or Peter made everyone leave the room. So you're here by yourself. And I'm thinking, okay. The only thing I knew was that this gentleman spoke Japanese. Thank goodness, because I don't speak Korean. He said, we'll just leave you here alone. And I'm thinking, yes, I feel very alone. And on my knees, I really had to pray, what am I doing here? Help me. But I just felt that the love that this family must have, at least this gentleman had. He's been talking about Christian Science to this gentleman for years now. They've been battling with this cancer for at least 3-4 years. And I just felt his love first. And I thought, God must love him too, Mr. Cho. And on my knees, I asked God, what is it that I need to know? And the thought that came to me was, see what I see. When I am almost avoiding to see that person, God is asking me to see what he's seeing. Love is seeing, another name for God. Life is seeing. The activity in him when he's seemingly not even moving. Seeing the soul, that liveliness within him. Principle. We have 7 synonyms in this textbook that we think through when we think about God and man. So I was going through this list of things like, how is God seeing him? And you know, after a while, I think I fell asleep. I just kind of, maybe for a few seconds, I don't know how, for a minute. But I was woken up because I heard a sound. And when I opened my eyes, he was moving and he looked at me and said something in Korean. And so I quickly said, well, in Japanese, my name is Fujiko and Mr. So invited me to be here. And he said in Japanese, oh, you're the one. And then he looked around. He's still sleeping lying down at this point. He says, where is my family? And I said, well, they're all out there. And I haven't even said hello to them. He said, I want to see my family. And you know what he said? I want to walk. And so I went out. I looked for, one of the children's daughter. I think he specifically asked me to go get his daughter. The daughter approached her and said, your father is calling. And she was in awe. The tears welled up in her eyes, and then she just, hurried back with me to his room. The daughter was worried. She was, trying to support, and he was like standing straight, and he said, let's walk. And we walked the entire ward the whole floor. It was a big, you probably know Samson, that the whole floor where he was staying. And all the nurses from nursing stations will come up, like popping their heads and things. But we walked all around and came back. By that time, it was probably, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. They said, we'll take you back to the hotel. After a little meal, I went back. Next day, when I visited him, he's sitting in the sofa, and he said, come. He's calling me, and I sat down, and he said, did you pray? That was his first question. And I said, yes. And he looked around and said, where did you pray to? I don't see a statue. And I said, well, before I answered, he said, well, I am Confucian. I'm a student of Confucianism. And I said, okay. But he just insisted, where did you pray to? What God do you pray to? So I said to him, Mr. Cho, God I pray to is everywhere. God is within you and within me. And God that I know is love and is your Father and is everyone's Father. And he had never heard God being explained that way. But he said, you must have a prayer or two. And I said, yes. He said, please teach me a prayer. So I introduced to him the Lord's Prayer. And he said, I want this in my room written up in Korean. So by the afternoon, we had a huge paper, a rolled up paper with Koreans, in Korean, written out the Lord's Prayer. I couldn't read it, but they did. We became good friends. There was this a sense of trust that I really felt that he wanted to ask me more questions. And one of the questions he asked me, either that day or the following day, was, Fujiko, what is my job now that I'm here? I have already built 3 companies and gave it to my sons and son-in-law. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. What is my job? He's asking me for a career consultant, counseling. So only thing I could think of was, Mr. Cho, your job is to love. So the next time when the nurse came in, he said, come. And he's looking at her and said, this job is really hard. Would you like to get a job in my company? And then the next nurse came, and he's examining the fingers, and oh, you don't have a wedding ring. Would you like me to find you a husband? This is the way he thought he was expressing love. And I found out later that day, way in the wee hours when I was talking with a family member, that I found out that he was hitting and yelling at nurses. Every single nurse had been hit. He was in agony, he was angry, he was in pain. And so you can imagine suddenly this man who walked the entire ward is now saying, I'll find you a new job. I'll find you a husband. But more than that, they told me that he had never said thank you or delicious to his wife in their entire marriage life. No thank you or delicious, I wouldn't be cooking. But this dear Korean wife was cooking and serving this man. In the children's words, they considered him a tyrant. He was a successful man, not lovable. But suddenly this whole transformation had taken place. He was thanking the children. He was thanking everyone he had seen. Because he took this job seriously. I told him it's to love is his job, right? And he said, but My father died very early, and because he was the oldest of the entire clan, I had to take care of the rest of the clan, not just the family. It's the entire relatives. He had to put them through colleges, find them jobs, and that it really helped to have his own business too, because a lot of them started to work for him. He forgot the boy that wanted to become an artist. And I said, let's start drawing. Next day, he had this beautiful, the sketch pad and the colorful pastel, the pencil, and he was drawing the basket full of fruits and the vases, the flowers in the vases. And the hand that drew those pictures looked like to me that he went to an art school. It was always within him. It was revealed to him who he was. How important it was then for me to continue to see that and stay with that thought, see what I see, and I, being God, that love, to put only that structure that we can see man as perfect. More recently, I found this verse to be equally important and helpful. It says in James, in the New Testament, does a fountain send forth at the same place sweet water and bitter? Can't, right? If it's sweet, it's a sweet water. If it's bitter, it's bitter. But what if it's coming like mixture of bitter and sweet? Does it become bittersweet? No. I tried that. It always comes out as bitter. Bittersweet is only in your memory, I think. Like some stories that you're like, oh, that was bittersweet. But there's no such thing as bittersweet when it comes to mixing these bitter and sweet, equal amount. And interestingly now, something told me to look up this word fountain. And it was a similar word in Aramaic, and it was translated into Greek as the word that Jesus used in that sentence. The light of the body is the eye. The eye was same as fountain. Isn't that interesting? Coincidence? Then I had to think, why are eyes fountain and fountain eye? Now, this is a little quiz for you. 30 seconds. Anyone? It's so, we take it for granted, but single source. But also, do you know, and you know this, your eye is constantly producing moisture. Did you know you have fountain here? Right? It's so natural to think that, yes, something that is coming out from us, this eye where it catches the light, is a symbol. How we catch that divine light? How are we reflecting our own self? Can we really be the eye in our community, in a family, in our own country even, to be that eye, to see through God's eye? So I'm not saying that we have two realities that we swing back and forth by. There's only one reality. And I would like to ask you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're a fish in the water. You're happy, you're free, you love this water. Right? It's natural for you, but you don't really know anywhere except this comfortable and the right environment. And then if someone yanks you out of the water, you start to suffer because you're suddenly in the environment that you're not supposed to be in it. Now you can open your eyes. I'm going to put you back in the water. Plop. You're a free and happy fish. And I just thought, what if the environment that we're supposed to be in is spirit? That we are totally spiritual. And we stay in that environment. We are conscious of that environment. We are happy, healthier, creative. We can move forward. But if we feel like we are limited mortals in this box, the jack-in-the-box I call, because you're trying to wind it and try to come up, just see a little bit of the reality outside, but you're never leaving that box. Which would you like to choose? The free spiritual idea in spirit or the jack-in-the-box? I would tend to think I would like to choose an environment that's totally spiritual. And I was sharing this with one of my colleagues, who is also a Christian Science practitioner and lecturer, and he said, Fujiko, do you know that Mary Baker Eddy's contemporary, Sojourner Truth, said, God is like the great ocean of love. We live and move in it like the fishes of the sea. And I thought, Sojourner Truth, I think most of you know, she was a slave and became a woman preacher. And I thought, wow, I thought my idea was pretty original. You know, if it's universal idea, it must have some truth in it. If she felt, she didn't have any education, like formal education, but she knew God to be that spirit that we live and move and have our being. Well, we explore this idea of seeing, and I know that you already have that eye of that divine love that obliterates anything that is unlike good, lovely, harmonious, sufficient, meaningful, secured. So we can really begin to see ourselves first as God sees us. But when you go out in the community, please remember, God's eye view of you is constantly with you. When we move, we traveled from India to China to Korea. We have all these countries, and on the map we have these borderlines. But if we go up in the satellite and look at our own Earth, like Google Map, we don't really necessarily have to have these lines. And if you go even higher, how God sees us, there is no difference. And God is impartial God, universal God, unconditional love. And it's constantly guarding you, guiding you, and watching over you. So thank you very much for being here, and you will go home safely.